You're deep in the frozen Alps during World War II. Snow is falling so thick you can barely see 10 feet ahead. Your breath forms clouds in the air that could give away your position. Behind you, hidden in a cave carved into the mountainside, are 7 Jewish children who haven't eaten a proper meal in days. And marching up the trail toward you right now is an SS patrol. 8 heavily armed soldiers trained to hunt people exactly like the ones you're protecting. You're just a shepherd. You've got a walking stick, a wool coat, and about 30 seconds to come up with a plan that'll either save everyone or get you all killed. What do? This actually happened, and the way this shepherd pulled it off, it's one of the most brilliant pieces of quick thinking you'll ever hear about. But here's what makes it even more incredible. This wasn't some trained resistance fighter or secret agent. This was an ordinary guy who spent his days tending sheep in the mountains. He had no formal education, couldn't even read or write very well, but what he understood better than anyone was these mountains. And that knowledge was about to become the difference between life and death for 8 innocent people. The year is 1943. The place is a remote valley in the French Alps, right near the border with Italy. Now, if you know anything about this period, you know the Nazis had occupied France and they were hunting down Jewish people with terrifying efficiency. Cities were dangerous. Towns were dangerous. Basically, anywhere with roads and buildings meant papers, checkpoints, and constant patrols. So a lot of people who were trying to escape, they headed for the one place the Nazis couldn't easily control: the mountains. But here's the thing about the Alps in winter. They're absolutely brutal. We're talking temperatures that drop to 20 below zero, avalanches that can bury entire valleys, trails that turn into sheets of ice where one wrong step means falling hundreds of feet. Most people couldn't survive up there for a day, let alone weeks or months. That's where people like our shepherd came in. See, there was this loose network of locals: farmers, shepherds, woodcutters. People who knew every cave, every hidden path, every spot where you could find shelter or water. And some of them, not all but some, they decided to help. Our shepherd, let's call him Marcel because that's the name that appears in one of the few written accounts of this story. He was in his early 40s. He'd lived his entire life in these mountains. His father had been a shepherd, his grandfather too. Marcel knew these peaks the way you know your own neighborhood. Every rock formation, every change in the weather, every animal track. During the summer months, he'd take his flock up to the high pastures where the grass was good. During winter, he'd move them down lower, but he'd still go up into the mountains regularly to check on things, to hunt, to gather wood. The point is, when refugees started appearing in his valley, desperate and hunted, Marcel knew places where they could hide, places the Nazis would never find on their own. By early 1943, he was sheltering a group in a cave system he'd known about since he was a boy. 7 people total. 3 children, 2 teenagers, and 2 adults. They'd been there for almost a month, and Marcel had been bringing them food whenever he could. Bread, cheese, dried meat. Whatever he could spare without making his own family suspicious, because you have to understand, even helping these people was a death sentence if you got caught. The Nazis didn't mess around. They'd execute you, your family, sometimes your whole village. Now here's where things get tense. The SS had gotten smarter about mountain searches. At first, they just sent regular Wehrmacht soldiers up there, and honestly, those guys were city kids who didn't know anything about alpine survival. They'd stumble around for a few hours, get cold, and go back down. But the SS, they started recruiting local guides, people who knew the mountains, and they started doing systematic sweeps. That meant even the hidden spots weren't safe anymore. On this particular morning in February, Marcel had made the trek up to the cave to bring supplies. It was a brutal climb, took him almost 3 hours through knee-deep snow. When he got there, the family was in bad shape. The youngest child, a girl maybe 6 years old, she was running a fever. Her mother was trying to keep her warm, but they were low on blankets, low on everything. Marcel knew they couldn't stay there much longer, but moving them, in this weather, that was almost as dangerous as staying put. He was getting ready to head back down when he heard something that made his blood freeze. Voices, German voices, and they were close. Marcel rushed to the mouth of the cave and looked down the trail. There they were. 8 SS soldiers, maybe half a mile away, moving in a search pattern. They had dogs. That was new, that was really bad. Dogs could track scents even in the snow, could find cave entrances that humans might miss. Marcel turned back to the family. They'd heard the voices too. The mother had her hand over the little girl's mouth, trying to keep her quiet. Everyone was staring at Marcel, waiting for him to tell them what to do. Now think about this situation. There's no back exit to this cave. The entrance is the only way in or out. If those soldiers come up here with dogs, they'll find everyone. Running isn't an option. The family is weak, the children can't move fast, and there's nowhere to run to anyway. The whole mountainside is just open snow. You'd see people from a mile away. Fighting. Marcel's got a knife he uses for cutting rope. That's it. 8 trained soldiers with rifles against a shepherd with a knife and a group of starving civilians. Not exactly great odds. So what Marcel does next, it's either crazy or genius, honestly maybe both. He tells the family to stay absolutely silent no matter what they hear. Then he grabs his walking stick, steps out of the cave and starts walking straight down the trail toward the soldiers. Now you might be thinking, what? That's suicide. But here's what Marcel understood that nobody else did. If he tried to hide, if he ran, that would tell the soldiers something was wrong. That would make them search harder. But if he acted completely normal, if he had a reason to be up here that made perfect sense, then maybe, just maybe, they'd move on. As he gets closer to the patrol, Marcel starts doing something that seems absolutely insane. He starts yelling. In French, which most SS soldiers didn't speak fluently, he's shouting and waving his stick around like he's angry about something. The soldiers see him, and immediately their rifles come up. The officer in charge, this tall guy with a scar on his face, he yells in broken French for Marcel to stop. Marcel stops, but he keeps talking. He's gesturing wildly up toward a different part of the mountain, pointing and shaking his head. The officer steps forward. In German, he demands to know what Marcel's doing up here. Now Marcel speaks some German, not fluently, but enough. It was common in this region near the border. He explains that he's tracking a wolf, says there's a wolf that's been killing his sheep and he tracked it up into these mountains this morning. The officer looks skeptical. He asks why Marcel would hunt a wolf alone without a gun. Marcel says he doesn't own a gun. He shows the officer his walking stick, which has this heavy iron tip on the end. Says he's killed wolves with it before. You get close enough, one good hit to the skull, it's over. Now here's the brilliant part. While he's explaining this, Marcel is slowly leading the patrol away from the cave. He's walking and talking, showing them tracks in the snow. Except these aren't wolf tracks. They're probably fox tracks, or maybe even tracks Marcel made himself earlier. But the soldiers don't know the difference. They're following him, listening to his story, and every step they take is a step away from the family hiding in that cave. But then one of the dogs starts pulling toward the cave direction. The handler says something to the officer. Marcel's heart is pounding because he knows if that dog catches the scent, it's over. So he does something that takes unbelievable nerve. He interrupts the officer, gets right in his face, and starts arguing. He's saying the wolf went the other way, saying these soldiers are going to scare it off, saying he's been tracking this animal all morning and they're ruining everything. He's acting indignant, offended, like they're messing up his hunt. And here's the thing about acting completely normal, completely confident. It works. The officer is annoyed now. He tells Marcel to get lost, says they're conducting military operations and Marcel needs to go home. Marcel argues a bit more for show, then throws up his hands like he's disgusted, turns around and starts walking back down the mountain. But not toward the cave. He takes a completely different path. The whole time he's walking, he can feel the soldiers watching him. If he even glances toward the cave, if he shows any interest in that direction, they'll know something's up. He walks for about 20 minutes until he's completely out of sight of the patrol. Then he takes this crazy detour, looping way around through this incredibly dangerous ravine area that he knows the soldiers won't follow. It takes him almost 2 hours to circle back up to the cave. When he finally gets there, he finds the family exactly where he left them. They haven't moved. The mother is crying silently, still holding the little girl. They heard the soldiers pass by. The dogs had gotten within maybe 50 yards of the cave entrance before the patrol moved on. But here's where the story gets even more intense. Marcel realizes they can't stay here anymore. The SS will be back. They're doing systematic searches now, and eventually they'll check every cave in this area. The family needs to move tonight, even though moving in darkness through these mountains is basically a death wish. But staying is certain death, so really, there's no choice. Marcel tells them the plan. There's a shepherd's hut about 6 miles away on the Italian side of the border. It's abandoned this time of year, but it's got walls and a roof, and most importantly, it's outside the area the SS is searching. But getting there means crossing a high pass. In winter, at night, with children, the pass is over 9,000 feet up. The temperature there will be well below zero. There will be ice, wind, probably visibility so bad you can't see your own feet. The father asks if there's any other way. Marcel says no. They leave at dusk. That gives them maybe an hour of twilight to make the most dangerous part of the climb, then they'll have moonlight after that if the clouds clear. It's not a good plan. Honestly, it's a terrible plan, but it's the only plan they've got. So as the sun starts to set, this group of 8 people starts climbing. Marcel goes first, testing every step because in these conditions, you don't get second chances. One person slips, they could take everyone else down with them. They're roped together, which means if someone falls, either the others catch them or they all fall together. The children are terrified but trying to be brave. The little girl with the fever, her father is carrying her on his back even though he's already exhausted. They climb for hours. At one point, they're crossing this exposed ridge where the wind is so strong it's literally knocking people off their feet. Marcel has to find a different route, which adds another mile to the journey. The temperature has dropped so low that their water has frozen solid. Several people have frostbite starting on their fingers and toes. The teenage boy, maybe 16 years old, he starts falling behind. He's at the end of the rope line and he keeps stumbling. Marcel realizes the kid is going into hypothermia. His body is shutting down. They stop in this tiny sheltered spot, just a depression in the rocks that blocks the wind a little bit. Marcel knows they can't stay long. If they stop moving for too long in this cold, they'll freeze to death. But the boy can't keep going like this. So Marcel does something that probably saved the kid's life. He takes off his own coat and wraps it around the teenager. Now Marcel's up here in sub-zero temperatures in just a wool shirt. But Marcel's body is used to this, he's acclimated. The kid isn't. They get moving again, and Marcel sets a faster pace because now he's got to stay warm through movement or he's going to freeze too. Finally, after what feels like forever, they crest the pass. And for the first time in hours, the news is good. The clouds have cleared. The moon is out. And there, down in the valley below them, Marcel can see the dark shape of the hut. They're not safe yet. They still have to descend, and going downhill on ice in the dark is just as dangerous as climbing up. But at least now they have a destination they can see. The descent takes another 2 hours. By the time they reach the hut, everyone is at the absolute limit of their endurance. Marcel breaks open the door. Inside, it's not much. Stone walls, a dirt floor, an old fireplace. But it's shelter, and right now that's everything. He gets a fire going, which is risky because smoke could give away their position, but it's either risk the smoke or watch these people freeze. As the hut warms up, people start to come back to life a little. The mother checks her daughter. The fever's still there, but the little girl is alive. Everyone is alive. Marcel stays with them through the night, making sure the fire doesn't go out, making sure nobody slips into hypothermia now that they've stopped moving. In the morning, he'll have to go back. He's got his own family to think about, his own sheep. But he's done what he set out to do. He got them across the border. On the Italian side, there are different risks, different patrols, but there are also partisan groups who can help. The family has a chance now. Without Marcel, they wouldn't have made it through the day. Before he leaves the next morning, the father tries to thank him, tries to ask how they can ever repay him. Marcel just shakes his head. He tells them to keep moving south to find the partisans to survive. That's the only things he needs. Then he starts the long trek back to his own valley. When he gets home, he tells his wife he was out checking on the flock, got caught in bad weather, had to shelter overnight. She probably doesn't believe him, but she doesn't ask questions. It's safer not to know. Now here's what makes this story even more remarkable. This wasn't the only time Marcel did this. Over the next year and a half, until the liberation in 1945, he helped smuggle at least 30 people across those mountains. Some were Jewish families like the one I just told you about. Others were resistance fighters, downed Allied pilots, political refugees. Marcel didn't discriminate. If you needed help and you ended up in his valley, he'd help you if he could. He never talked about it. After the war, when people started documenting these rescue stories, Marcel's name didn't come up for years. He didn't want recognition, didn't want medals. He just went back to being a shepherd. It wasn't until the 1970s, when one of the people he'd saved published a memoir, that the world learned about what he'd done. By then, Marcel had passed away. He never knew that the little girl he'd helped save that night, the one with the fever, she'd grown up to become a doctor. That the teenage boy he'd given his coat to went on to have a family of his own, grandchildren who exist because Marcel made a split-second decision to walk toward an SS patrol instead of running away. Think about that moment again. Standing outside that cave, watching soldiers with dogs coming up the trail. Everything in your body is screaming at you to hide, to run, to do anything except walk straight toward the danger. But Marcel understood something crucial. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do, the smartest thing, is to act like you have nothing to hide. To be so boldly normal that people don't think to question you. And that knowledge of the mountains, that deep understanding of the terrain that came from a lifetime of living there, that turned out to be just as valuable as any weapon. Marcel couldn't outfight the SS, but he could outthink them. He could lead them away using their own assumptions against them. They assumed a lone shepherd in the mountains must be doing shepherd things. They assumed the tracks in the snow were what Marcel said they were because they didn't know any better. And those assumptions created just enough doubt, just enough delay, for 8 people to stay hidden. The story of the Holocaust is full of horror, and we need to remember that horror to understand what happened. But it's also full of these moments of incredible courage from ordinary people. People who risked everything, not because they were heroes, not because they thought they'd be remembered, but because in that moment they made a choice. They saw other human beings in danger and decided to help, even when helping meant putting their own lives on the line. Marcel the shepherd, he wasn't special in the way we usually think about heroes. He wasn't a soldier or a spy. He didn't have special training or resources. What he had was knowledge, quick thinking, and a moral compass that told him hiding children from people who wanted to murder them was worth risking his own life. And in the end, that was enough. That split-second decision to walk down that trail toward an SS patrol instead of hiding, that one moment of incredible nerve, it rippled forward in time. It created futures that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Families, children, grandchildren, whole branches of possibility that grew from a single act of courage in the frozen Alps. So the next time you hear someone say one person can't make a difference, remember Marcel. Remember that shepherd standing in the snow with nothing but a walking stick and a story about hunting wolves. Remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to look away when someone needs help, because you never know. Your moment might come. That split second where you have to choose between the easy path and the right one. And if it does, maybe you'll remember a shepherd in the Alps who showed us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they decide that other people's lives matter more than their own safety. That's not just history. That's a reminder of what humans are capable of when we choose courage over fear, compassion over indifference. And that's a story worth remembering.